Hey, mixing friend, it's Graham from the recordingrevolution.com. In the last video, if you caught it, we talked about the rule of thumb. Always mix the most important section of your song first. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch that video. It's really short, really to the point and helpful. Now, let's take that one step further. Once you've got a balance, which I recommend you do, meaning you have all the tracks open and you're just using your volume fader and your pan pots, no plugins. Once you got a good starting point balance and you're thinking about bringing in EQs, compressors, things like that, I like to work on one instrument at a time and then bring in the other instruments. So they're not in solo, but the very first instrument will be in solo. So you can hear it the most and you start to add to it and you build on top and then you got all the tracks together. And this is the next tip. Mix the most important instrument first. Okay? You loop the most important section, you get a balance with everything, but now when you want to drop in plugins, you focus on the most important instrument first. Well, okay, first of all, what is the most important instrument? And second of all, why? Let's start with the why. The why is because I don't love mixing in solo because solo lies to you. No one's going to hear your instruments in solo, right? No one's going to hear your bass guitar all by itself. They'll never hear it all by itself. So it really matters nothing what it sounds like in solo. It only matters what it sounds like with everything else. And what's amazing about sound is things can sound different when they're played alongside other things. So it's all an illusion. It's all smoke and mirrors. We just want to create the illusion of that bass sounding dope. It doesn't have to sound dope by itself. It can sound pretty weak by itself, but if for some reason alongside the kick drum and that guitar, it sounds full, that's all that matters. So I'm a big fan of mixing with everything in together, but sometimes I like to start with one instrument by itself in solo, and then once that sounds good, bring in the next instrument, keeping the first instrument there as well. So now there's two instruments together, and then bring in a third one. So you're adding them all together so that you're really only looking at one instrument in solo, but it gives you a little bit of focus. So when you do this most important instrument first, you get a chance to do it in solo. It's like the only instrument you get to work on in solo, and you can make it sound amazing, and then everything else has to sound good alongside of that. I think it's a good benchmark for you. Now, that leads to the most important question, the one that maybe you're asking, which is, well, what is the most important instrument? That depends on who you ask. I think, in general, the most important instrument is the vocal, meaning most modern music has a vocal. The vocal carries the emotion and it carries the lyrical content of the song. And it's the human element that people connect with. No offense to you non-vocalists. I love you because I love instruments. And I could listen to Pat Metheny all day long. But vocals are the most important, yes, to the big picture. But if you're asking me, vocals are the easiest to mix. The easiest to mix. So why would I start with the easiest track first in solo? Why wouldn't I go for the most complex instrument first so I have a chance to attack it in solo and make sure it's amazing? To me, that's drums. Drums, drums, drums. All day, every day are the most important instrument to mix first. I like to mix vocals dead last. I throw them in last. I've talked about that on the channel before. It's because they're easiest to get them to sit well in a mix if they're the last thing in. But you can ask plenty of my friends who have more awards than I do, who always mix the vocals first. And they mix everything around the vocal. And there's nothing wrong with that. I love their mixes. It just doesn't work for me. It just doesn't make sense to me when I physically do it. So either way, you get to pick. It could be the vocal. Doesn't matter. This principle still applies. Whatever is the most sonically important instrument to you that you really want to work hard at and get it perfect and then build the song around, pick that first. So for me, you could be listening to a song like this with lots of stuff in it.
We need people who seek to understand instead of demonize.
You could be like, well, where do I start mixing? Acoustic guitars, lead guitars, bass. There's even organs and opera vocals later in this song. Drums. Drums, drums, drums. So once I've got a balance, I would loop the most important section of the song first, which is probably here. would probably loop that section, watch the last video. Then I would solo the drums. Because now I can make sure that the kick, I mean, the drums are so sonically complex. We need a kick drum. Just the kick drum alone is sonically complex. There's low fundamental stuff, but kick drums aren't just about low end. They're all about mid-range and punch, 1K, 2K, 3K, sometimes 5K to make that little beater cut through nicely. There's so many sonic elements to a modern kick drum in any genre. So just getting the kick drum done well alone is a challenge. And then snares, snare is arguably the most important element of the drums, but kick and snare, and then of course getting the cymbals just right and getting the toms to have the punch and the tone but not be muddy and not be flabby, and then getting the room balance right and maybe compressing the room. I mean, I'm listing a million things. This is why drums are so fun and awful at the same time, because they're a beast to work on. So what I do is I would loop that most important section of the song first and then solo the most important instrument first, which it's the drums. Unless there are no drums, for me, 99% of the time, it's the drums. I get those sounding amazing, and then I build from there. I'll bring in the bass or the guitars or the piano, and then move along, bring in more stuff. So I'm building back out the mix until I've got everything. And when you bring something new in and it covers up the last thing you did, it's very easy to go, it's this new track that's covering up the good stuff. So I need to focus on making sure the new track isn't masking. It's not just random, like what's covering up what. You kind of know because you have a methodical way of building out your mix. So that's the other rule of thumb for you today, and that's it. Mix the most important instrument first and then build from there. I'll tell you, I start with drums, and 99% of the time it's drums, then bass, then I bring in the guitars, then I bring in any keyboards or synths. Unless it's a piano-centric song, then the pianos would come before the guitars. Whatever the main rhythm instrument is comes after the bass. And vocals are last, lead vocals, and then I bring in the background vocals absolutely last because I want them to be tucked just under the lead vocal. Again, you might start with the vocal. That's fine. The principle is the same. Make the vocal sound perfect, and then as you bring in the drums and the bass and the synths and whatever else, make sure they don't cover up the vocal, because that's the most important thing for you. And the vocals are super important, so they have to stick out well in all genres, especially if you're in country. The vocal's always louder in country, so you really got to know your genre, but the vocal's so important. I'm not throwing shade at the vocal. I'm just saying have a methodical process, and this is how it works. So 2 things. 1, leave me a comment. Let me know what to you is the most important instrument in the mix. What do you find yourself mixing first? Either way, I want to know. Leave me a comment below. Second, if you want to know more about my mixing process, if you want a step-by-step framework for how to not only mix, but master, and not only master, but the other 4 critical steps to creating radio-ready songs, download my free guide. It's called My 6 Steps to a Radio-Ready Song Guide. It's absolutely free. It's a great resource. It's one that you'll reference over and over again. It's short enough to read quickly and reference when you're making music in your home studio. It's absolutely free. Just click the link below in the description, or go to radioreadyguide.com. As always, my friend, thanks for watching. Thanks for liking the video and subscribing to this channel. It means a ton. And I'll see you on another video real soon.